Welcome to the Newsome MMA podcast, partnered with Heavy Duty Fight Management. I'm your host, as always, Newsome, with your co-host, Jon, and tonight we're going to be breaking down UFC on ESPN 3 from Sunrise in Florida. Jon, how are you doing tonight, man?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. I'm very good. Looking forward to another exciting night of fights.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming back off the St. Petersburg card, which was a fantastic card. I mean, the judges could have taken half a night off, so... Before we start, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to all of the supporters of the show, by the way, along with, your kind words each week as well. It really does mean a lot to us. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast platforms across YouTube, SoundCloud and Spotify as well, just to make sure that you never miss an episode again. And especially YouTube, because we've also got much more content on there opposed to just the weekly breakdowns. We've got MMA media content on there as well, which includes pre-fight and post-fight interviews too. So make sure you subscribe on there, and we'll really appreciate that for sure.
Definitely,
but with that said, let's break down some fights at UFC Sunrise, and we enter the Showtime Fights. The first Showtime fight tonight is in the co-main event of the evening. We've got the returning Greg Hardy against also the returning, the lifeguard, Dmitrii Smoliakov. Jon, who have you got?
Yeah, this is a really interesting fight, and I'm really intrigued to see Greg Hardy in there again. Obviously, we saw him previously against Alan Crowder, making his debut back in January. And I think a lot of people, myself included, I think if my memory serves me well, I think you were picking Hardy as well to go in there and blitz Crowder and finish him quickly like he has done for the other guys in his career. But Crowder didn't read the script, and he was able to eat some of those shots from Hardy. And I was watching that fight back, and I think it was definitely a case from Hardy of UFC jitters. Those first that first occasion under the bright lights, you could see in the first minute he was putting everything behind those punches, and he kind of burnt himself out a little bit. And he did show glimpses of potential and things to be excited about. Obviously, we know he hits hard. A couple of times he stuffed those Crowder takedowns. I know Crowder isn't particularly known for his fantastic wrestling game and heavy top pressure, but he looked okay defending takedowns. He did get taken down and managed to get back to his feet as well. I mean, on some of the occasions he did just rely on his athletic and brute strength to get out of those positions more so than technique, but obviously we know that over time technique will start to take over, and it'll become second nature to him. But and obviously we know how that fight ended with that illegal knee. I think he was frustrated. Crowder, we know, didn't really want to stand in exchange with him, which doesn't surprise any of us really. Who wants to stand in front of a guy who's knocked his first three opponents out within a combined total of about a minute and a half? Not many people. So yeah, I think he was just frustrated, and unfortunately I think that the knee was intentional. I think he knew what he was doing, but obviously only he knows the answer to that. And he's going up against the guy who you say, Smoliakov, who's coming back for his second stint in the UFC. I was watching this guy's previous UFC fights back over the last few days against Luis Henrique and Cyril Asker. I mean, both guys, and neither of them are great names in the heavyweight division, and neither guy really, I don't think, are ever going to break into that top 10 or anything like that. And he struggled against them, to be honest. I mean, he was well known on the regional scene, the Russian scene and things like that for his good wrestling background. I know he's got is it a freestyle wrestling background as well.
Yeah, master of sports.
Yeah, and his takedown defense wasn't great. His submission defense wasn't great when he got down to the mat. He tired. I mean, in that Luis Henrique fight, he tired. Cyril Asker was able to take him down, transition from side control into the mount with real ease, and then just rain down punches. And he didn't really try to defend anything. He didn't try to get out of the positions. He didn't try to bump the hip and try and get back into half guard when he was trapped in that mount. He just kind of shelled up and let Asker rain down about 300 unanswered punches on him, and it was stopped. And obviously with the Luis Henrique fight, he gave up his back, and Henrique eventually locked in the rear naked choke in the second round. So what we do know is he does tend to gas. His takedown defense, and like I said, his takedown defense and submission defense isn't great, but I don't think Greg Hardy's going to come out there and start trying to wrestle him. If anything, it's going to be the other way around. And I really do think this fight's going to be, I think it's going to be pretty ugly again. I think Hardy, as we know, he comes out fast. I think he's going to come out fast again if he can't get Smoliakov out of there early. Then I think he's going to tire. Smoliakov may tire as well. Obviously, we stand in the early barrage, and then it could turn into a bit of a ugly, sloppy heavyweight brawl that we've seen so often in that division when the heavy hitters can't get their opponent out of there quickly. Now saying that, which way does it go? My initial lean was again to Greg Hardy, just because of that knockout power. Smoliakov was getting hit by Asker. He was getting hit by Luis Henrique. I mean, I think Henrique dropped him briefly, if I remember, in that fight, or he certainly hurt him up against the fence. Asker was landing on him. We know Greg Hardy's got power, so it wouldn't surprise me if Greg Hardy puts him away early and finishes him and maybe drops him or wobbles him and then just lands blows similar to the Cyril Asker finish, just raining him down blows until the ref jumps in. It equally wouldn't surprise me if Smoliakov survived the early onslaught and then tried to utilise his offensive wrestling, because he has got good offensive wrestling. Obviously, I mentioned about the defensive side of things, but it's his offensive wrestling that is stronger in, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he, like I say, he weathered the early storm, utilised that offensive wrestling, just smothered Hardy and frustrated him, and was able to grind out a decision, or maybe later in the fight, as Hardy continues to tire, maybe he locks on a submission of his own. I'm going to give Greg Hardy a second chance, and I'm going to pick Greg Hardy to win this fight. I do think he'll be able to land shots on Smoliakov, as I mentioned. He's been hit before in his previous UFC bouts. Greg Hardy hits hard. He's got power in his hands. His jab looked good in his UFC debut. He's landing a couple of big overhand rights. I know that the crowd was able to eat them, but I'm going to give Greg Hardy the benefit of the doubt again. He stung me last time, but I'm going to stick by him. I'm going to go with Greg Hardy to win this fight, and I'm going to get him pick him to win via knockout in round 1.
Man, he stung you. I had him to close McGregor Gillespie parlay, so definitely stung me for sure. And the one thing I will say about that fight as well against Alan Crowder is and I've not really seen many people talk about it. I spoke about it straight afterwards. It's the first thing that I noticed when the whole situation unfolded after the illegal shot landed. And I genuinely think the referee made a huge error in that fight,
wasn't it? Yeah.
As Crowder was laying down, as people were over him, the referee turned around and he screamed into one of the corners or to the judges or to somebody, and he screamed so loud that even we heard it through the mics from the cage. He said, "If he doesn't get up, I am going to disqualify him." And at that point, if Crowder didn't hear that, his team will have definitely heard that. And, sure. I'm not going to make assumptions and say that he took a route out of the fight, because we don't know. And, I've never been cracked by a 270-pound dude with a knee in my face. So, I can't sit here and pretend that I know what that feels like. But, that was an error from the referee, because it did give a potential route out for a fighter, because he knew that if he didn't stand up, he gets a win. He gets another fight in the UFC. The UFC, we all believed at the time, had brought Crowder into that fight against Hardy, which was also the co-main event of that night, to potentially give Hardy a win. It's not a harsh thing to say. That's, it's part of a matchmaker's job to build up prospects, and that's what the UFC are doing. So, I do think it was a glaring error from the referee to do that. You know, I think the referee at the time sounded pretty pissed off that Hardy had landed that shot. So it is what it is. You know, we're all humans. We make mistakes. But touching upon matchmakers trying to build prospects up, I think it's exactly the case in this fight as well. And again, it's another co-main event. You've got someone like Greg Hardy fighting against Dmitrii Smoliakov in the co-main event when you've got fighters like Andrei Arlovski on the prelims. So, you know, it does beg the question, you know, are the UFC just trying to rewrite the script of what they tried to write the first time around against Alan Crowder? And I think that's the case here. But the one thing I will say is I totally believe Dmitrii Smoliakov is a better fighter than Alan Crowder, which is interesting because Greg Hardy was in a massive fight against Alan Crowder. You know, that wasn't the one-way ticket that we all thought it was going to be, or well, at least myself anyway. I can't speak for everybody. I thought Hardy was going to run through him, whether, you know, what you said, John, with it being UFC jitters, or whether he just finally faced an opponent that could really mix it up inside the cage and, you know, start level changing, really pin him against the cage, because that looks like right now with Hardy as a 3-1 professional, it totally looks like that's the way to beat Hardy, to close the distance, not give him any space, press him against the cage, shoot in, level change, just make him work in an ugly fight to tire him out, because once that cardio starts draining out of Greg Hardy, the punches will start slowing down, the power of the punches will come off a little bit as well, and then suddenly Hardy's not as dangerous as what he was in round one, and then you can start working other parts of your game. Now, we've already mentioned Dmitrii Smoliakov, master of sports in freestyle wrestling. So he does have a wrestling background, even though he has been taken down in a couple fights. But like you've already mentioned, John, you know, I don't see Greg Hardy shooting singles and doubles at Smoliakov. He'll be wanting to get in there and give UFC the highlight reel that they wanted in the last fight. So it's really tough to have any sort of confidence in Smoliakov, and I don't mean that with any disrespect. I just think that right now the UFC are handpicking the right fights to get exactly what they want out of Greg Hardy. Now, how Smoliakov does win this fight is he has to be relentless with the wrestling. He, you know, don't stand striking for any longer than sort of like 3, 4, 5 seconds with Greg Hardy, because you're running the risk of one of them shots landing and, you know, putting you to sleep. Smoliakov's got to close the distance. He's got to be smart in this fight. He can't go rushing in and shooting sloppy takedowns either, because Hardy will be able to counter with uppercuts. He will be able to counter with knees. I would imagine at ATT they're working and drilling those sort of attacks, or I was about to say defense in a way, you know, because if the takedowns are coming in sloppy, you can counter with, you know, the uppercuts and the knees. So I do imagine that ATT are drilling a lot of wrestling defensive techniques and strikes into Greg Hardy right now, because at least for the next, I mean, I can't say definitively because we don't know his future opponents, but I would imagine for at least the next 3 or 4 fights, opponents are going to be wanting to try and take him down because of the power and aggressiveness that he has. So I think ATT are going to have him well prepared. I think we have seen glimpses of his game improving, you know. I would imagine before that Alan Crowder fight, a couple of fights before that, I would imagine his wrestling defense and his get-up game wasn't anywhere close to where it was against Alan Crowder. And, you know, it didn't look great, but the dude's 4 fights into his professional career. It was 3 fights as he was fighting Alan Crowder, you know. You've got to give time for development, and you know he is developing. You can see that. I just think this is another case where the UFC are, like I've already mentioned, trying to rewrite that script from the last fight, put Smoliakov in there against Greg Hardy, bring him back. You know, he was 0-2 in the UFC. He went out there, he beat an 8-8 guy who's obviously now 8-9 in Bova AC Aslan challenge, and they've brought him back into the UFC, into a co-main event against one of their top prospects. So they believe one of their top prospects at heavyweight as well, you know, the King division. So, you know, you put 2 and 2 together, as I always say, you get 4. So I'm taking Greg Hardy to win. I think he knocks Dmitrii Smoliakov out in the first round. And in the next Showtime fight, we've got Alex Cowboy Oliveira versus Mike Perry. John, who have you got?
Yeah, again, this is going to be a great fight because these two guys very rarely put on a boring fight. They always come out there to fight and basically inflict as much damage on their opponent as humanly possible. Now, obviously, we know they're both coming into these fights on the back of a loss. We've got Alex Oliveira who fought against Gunnar Nelson most recently and lost in the second round via rear naked choke. And then obviously we've got Mike Perry who lost against another cowboy in Donald Cerrone via armbar in the first round. But obviously we saw a Mike Perry against Donald Cerrone, a Mike Perry that's been training over at Jackson Wink for that fight. Obviously, there was a lot made of it because Cerrone wasn't happy that he'd be trained there, so Cerrone went and trained elsewhere. And I was, although he got finished in the first round, I was relatively impressed with Mike Perry. We saw glimpses of him being a lot more tactical, using his technique a lot more. Obviously, we've seen in his fights previously, he's just been wild, aggressive. He leaves himself open to counters. He leaves himself open to being taken down quite easily. So in that Max Griffin fight, he was taken down quite regularly. But yeah, against Donald Cerrone, he tried to stick behind the jab a lot more, kept his hands high. He looked decent in the clinch. Obviously, we know how dangerous Donald Cerrone is in the clinch with his knees and his elbows, and he looked good in the clinch. He kept his defences tight, and that finishing sequence, let's not forget, all started from Mike Perry getting a very nice trip takedown off one of the clinches as well. Then he should really have, again, it's something he'll learn if he continues to train with the likes of Jackson Wink. He should really have got out of that situation because there was a bit of a scramble and he ended up on top again, and instead of just getting everything out of there and standing back up, he kind of hovered in Cerrone's guard, and Cerrone managed to throw up the legs and lock up that arm bar and get the tap with about 15 seconds left on the clock. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see how what developments Mike Perry's made again for this fight. Personally, I think he's quite lucky to be coming into this fight with a win in his against Paul Felder, because obviously Paul Felder broke his arm in that fight, so he could easily be coming in here on the back of 4 straight defeats, and he may not have even made it to this fight. He may be fighting to keep his place in the UFC if he lost his last 4, but he did get that win over Felder, so it gives him a bit more breathing room. And yeah, like I say, I'm interested to see how he comes out and faces Oliveira, because Oliveira's the kind of guy that can bring out that old style in Mike Perry, because Oliveira's aggressive. He comes forward. He throws heavy hands. He throws kicks, elbows, knees, everything. He's not a kind of guy to hang back and play it safe and work behind the jab. He'll come out firing on all cylinders, and that's why I'm so interested to see how Mike Perry reacts to that, because it's easy for him to get drawn into a firefight. We saw that against a few years back against Danny Roberts, a fight that he ended up winning with about 20 seconds left. That was at UFC 204 back in 2016. But if people haven't seen that fight or forgot about that fight, man, that was just a war for 3 rounds. And Danny Roberts kind of brought out that side of Mike Perry that we see so often, that overly aggressive style. And again, I think Oliveira can do that. And I think Oliveira's key to victory here is utilising those kicks, because he's got the height advantage. He's got a reach advantage over slight reach advantage over Perry. He's got those long legs, and he does have nasty kicks, especially those body kicks. And if you can start landing those on Mike Perry, I can see that. Just that anger switch getting turned on slowly in the back of Mike Perry's head, and that's when he'll really come out swinging and leaves himself open to counters. And we know Oliveira's got power. He knocked out Carlo Pedasoli in the first round. He finished Ryan the Flair. He sets up a lot of his submissions as well with his strikes. Obviously, we saw him get a submission win over Carlos Condit, Tim Means. He's a dangerous guy everywhere. And if Perry does come out swinging and overly aggressive, Alex Oliveira can capitalise on that. But with that being said, we know that Mike Perry is hard to put away. He's never been finished in his career. Only losses have come via decision. He has knockout power himself, and Alex Oliveira has been knocked out. Look at the Yancy Medeiros fight. Alex Oliveira does tire occasionally. If he in the Medeiros fight, he got finished in the second round, but he was fading quite badly. Although his output was still pretty high, you could see that his power was waning in that fight, and he was tiring and slowing down. And so it's good for me. It's going to be a really, really interesting fight, just to see how it all plays out and how both guys approach one another. I really do think that Alex Oliveira will go in there with the game plan of getting Mike Perry's face and be really aggressive. And I think initially Mike Perry will go in there with the mindset of how he went into the Cerrone fight and try and be more technical and try and play it a bit safer and utilise technique rather than just sheer aggression and brute force. But ultimately, I'm going with Alex Oliveira to win this fight. I just think with his output, he's dangerous everywhere. Mike Perry has been taken down before. I know Alex Oliveira isn't a predominant takedown artist, but he can take fighters down. He can get submissions, or he works with submissions on the ground. He's always looking for something. Like I said, those kicks will be, I think, a big part of his arsenal. I think he'll try to throw a lot of kicks to the body, slow Mike Perry down, and obviously those heavy kicks landing, those heavy thuds always favour well in the judges' eyes, and that's when I think Mike Perry will start to get more aggressive and start to come forward, and they'll just both be teeing off on each other. I think it's going to be wild, but ultimately I think Alex Oliveira is if he can avoid being knocked out, which I think he will, I think he takes a decision just with his output. So I'm going with Alex Cowboy Oliveira to win this fight via decision.
Yeah, this fight's got all the makings to be all-out violence for sure. And we've really been looked after as well by the MMA gods, because initially it was supposed to be Alex Cowboy against Li Jingliang, which again, we all got excited for, a violent fight, and then Li Jingliang pulls out. We're like, oh no, what they're doing to us. And then they go and throw Mike Perry in there as well. So, we've really been looked after, a great replacement. But yeah, man, it's interesting listening to your analysis of that, John, because I've got a slightly different take on this. Like, I don't think Mike Perry is going to try and be very technical in this fight, because I think the way that Mike Perry beats Alex Oliveira in this fight is by making Oliveira move backwards and catching him with a punch going forwards himself. Now, the easiest way to do that is to get in Alex Cowboy Oliveira's face and draw him into a war, because I do agree with what you've said. Mike Perry will go to war against anybody, but so will Cowboy Oliveira, and I feel that that's the best path to victory for Mike Perry, because if he does try and keep this at distance, if he does try and go technique versus technique with Cowboy, I think Cowboy is going to completely piece him up, pick him apart. Like you've already mentioned, he's the taller guy in there. He's got a bigger reach. I feel like he's going to be more physically imposing as well, and he's got that sort of, I wouldn't say it's an exact karate stance, but he's got that long, wide stance, and that tends to make fighters that do have an inch or two on their opponent to just look much bigger in the cage. And because it's more of a sideward stance and it's wide, it's long, it's going to be harder for Mike Perry to actually come in and land a big shot, because he's got to get the angle right, he's got to come in at the right time. And I just feel the best thing that Perry can do in this fight is to come forward, get in his face, and draw that stance from Cowboy into more of a traditional stance, where the punches can land easy, where you can get inside a lot easier, where you can cut angles easier. And I just think that's Perry's best chance to win. The problem is with Cowboy is he uses kicks, he utilises kicks. You've already mentioned it, John. He's got nasty kicks, and with the wide low stance that Cowboy has, his movement in and out of range, and those kicks all added together, I just feel that Perry's going to have a very difficult time trying to close the distance to land anything. And I feel that Cowboy might have a very hairy half a first round, maybe a hairy first round. I'm not saying he's going to throw away the round and lose it, but what I'm saying is it's going to be, that first round is going to be quite dangerous for him, because that it's at that point where Mike Perry's going to be the sharpest in his mind. That's where Mike Perry will be trying to make adjustments and really trying to get inside and land those hard shots. And let's not forget, Mike Perry's got to do all this and be mindful of clinching up with Cowboy and potentially getting taken down as well, because I know Perry's not the easiest fighter to take down, but Cowboy's so imposing, man, and he don't give a fuck who he goes to the mat with. The dude was trying to take Gunnar Nelson down in round 2, and Mike Perry's just got a lot of work to do in that first round, is what I'm trying to say. But I don't think Perry's going to have a whole lot of success in trying to do that. And if he can't draw Oliveira out into a war, I definitely think come round 2, Perry's going to start getting frustrated. Like you've already mentioned, he'll start getting a little angry in there. He'll start losing his head, and at that point, the technique will be out the window. At that point, he'll be more hittable. His defense will be down, and he'll be going for broke, trying to put Cowboy away, which is still dangerous for Cowboy. But what that allows Cowboy to do is really start to work himself, really start to see those openings, take advantage of defensive holes that Perry's showing, if and when he does lose his head and starts getting a little bit frustrated. But ultimately, I cannot see Cowboy going into this fight and not trying to take Mike Perry down. I think he'll happily stand with him for a little bit, just to at the start of the fight, read Perry, see what he's about, see what he's trying to come in with, see how he's trying to close the distance, because what that'll do is just give intel for Cowboy of really how to close the distance safely and get the fight to the mat. I definitely think that's his game plan. But with the way Cowboy fights, with, like I've already mentioned, with the low base, the long stance, and using kicks, he can definitely get away with riding on the feet for a couple of minutes just till he makes the relevant reads of the fight, and then he can start moving in and trying to clinch up and trying to put Perry on the mat. I think he tires Perry out, man. I think he survives a potential onslaught in round 1. I think Perry gets aggressive round 2. I think once he's aggressive, Cowboy will tie up. I think he'll put him on the mat. I think he'll work him. He'll start landing some really hard shots. We saw in the Gunnar Nelson fight. That fight wasn't a million miles from being over in round 1 with the ground and pound that he was throwing, with Gunnar Nelson on bottom, and this is a world-class grappler we're talking about. I think with Perry, he may end up shelling up or turning his back. I think Cowboy Oliveira will snatch something. I think he'll submit him. So I'm going Alex Cowboy Oliveira to win, and I'm going to take him to win via submission. And in the last Showtime fight of the podcast, we've got the rematch. When I say rematch, it's actually a rebooked fight. We've got John Lineker versus Cory Sandhagen. John, who have you got?
I'm going to start sounding like a broken record now, but man, what a fight this is going to be. This is again a fight that's got real potential for fireworks, and one I'm really looking forward to going down. And I'm absolutely delighted that the UFC decided to rebook this fight, which I think was originally due to go down in January, if I remember correctly. But yeah, man. This could be great. I mean, everyone knows about John Lineker. We know what he's dangerous at. He's got his nickname's Hands of Stone, and he has got hands of stone. He puts people away, and he puts them to sleep. And I mean, when you look through his career and his record, his only loss since 2014 has come to TJ Dillashaw back in 2016 at UFC 207, and that was obviously a decision loss. And we don't want to go throwing wild shade out there, but TJ Dillashaw obviously failed his drugs test. We don't know how long or how often he's been using performance enhancing drugs for, so that may have played into that matchup as well. But before that, you're going back all the way to 2014 for a decision loss against Ali Bagautinov back at UFC 169. And as I mentioned, you know what you're going to get with John Lineker. He's going to walk forward. He's going to basically just rip. I was watching some tape back of the Brian Kelleher fight, the Marlon Vera fight, and he just rips hooks, man. He just rips hooks to the body. He rips hooks to the head. He'll mix up between body and head. He'll occasionally throw a jab in there. He'll occasionally throw a leg kick in there. But the majority of the time, man, he's just he really has mastered how to mix up those hooks as well. Because especially against Brian Kelleher, and he was really ripping the hooks, mixing it up nicely between body and head, and eventually that's what set up the win in round 3. And I think it's quite important to emphasise as well with John Lineker that if the fights go to a decision, he can win decisions. And with that Brian Kelleher fight, he knocked Kelleher out in round 3, so he carries that power into round 3. Although he slows, although he does physically look like he's tiring and punches are coming out a little slower, he does still have that power, and he can still put you away in the 3rd round, and he can still win decisions. His output is good. He'll just keep marching forward. It always looks good in the judges' eyes, and he's just a very, very tough guy to beat. And Cory Sandhagen has really impressed me so far in his UFC tenure. I mean, we spoke about him on the last couple of podcasts that we've done where he's been fighting. That he's just an exciting guy. He's young. He's resilient. He shows real heart in his fights. I mean, he nearly got finished against Yuri Alcantara. I mean, his submission defense in that was ridiculous. He came back in round 2, showed great heart, and got the win via ground and pound. He also mixes in body shots nicely. We saw him finish Austin Arnett with that lovely body shot in the 2nd round when those two met last year. And then we saw his offensive submission game against Batista in his last bout. I know that was a relatively short notice fight against the UFC newcomer, but he looked good, and he managed to get the win. Now, for me, Sandhagen has really got to utilise those kicks. We know he uses them often. We know he's got a massive height advantage over John Lineker. He's 5'11", where John Lineker's coming into the fight at 5'3". Sandhagen's got a big reach advantage. He's got, again, I mentioned it in the Oliveira fight, but Sandhagen's another guy with long limbs, and he uses those kicks. He uses front kicks. He mixes up the leg kicks and the head kicks really well, and that's going to be his key to victory. He's going to just have to keep distance, not allow John Lineker on the inside to rip those hooks and start working the body and start getting busy and racking up the damage or racking up the score in the judges' eyes. And yeah, Sandhagen does angle off well. He doesn't move straight backwards when he's defending strikes as well, which is very important against Lineker, because that's where Kelleher came and stuck. I mean, he was just retreating in a straight line, and then Lineker ripped the body and then ripped that left hook on the chin, and Kelleher was put away straight away. But Sandhagen does angle out, and he doesn't just back off in a straight line. And I think this fight has got real potential to be a really exciting fight, because, as I say, Sandhagen's got heart. He gets hit, and he can come back. He can be in precarious positions on the ground, and he can come back, and it's going to be fun to watch. But ultimately, I'm going to go with the veteran in John Lineker in this fight. I just think his forward pressure. Sandhagen is hittable. We saw that in the Alcantara fight. I mean, he can be landed on, and if Lineker can get on the inside and rip a couple of body shots and then mix it up and catch him clean on the chin, he can definitely put Sandhagen away. I mean, he's by far the heaviest hitter that Sandhagen's come up against so far. And like I said, even if he doesn't win the fight via knockout, John Lineker always looks good in the judges' eyes, because he's marching forward, and he's constantly swinging. He's constantly trying to land, and it wouldn't surprise me if Sandhagen can eke out a decision in this fight by utilising that reach advantage and just constantly maintain distance. But I don't think he's that kind of fighter. I mean, he comes to fight. He's aggressive. He's been aggressive in all his fights so far. So I just don't think he's the kind of guy that's going to go on the defensive and just try and point fight against Jon Lineker. I think he's going to come out here and try and put on a show, and he's going to scrap, and that doesn't really favour him in this fight because Jon Lineker is exceptionally good at getting in on the inside. I mean, he probably has a height and reach disadvantage against all of his opponents that he comes up against, but he still manages to get inside, he still manages to hit them, and he still manages to land on them. And yeah, I think Jon Lineker is going to win this fight, and I think he's actually going to knock Sandhagen out. I think he's going to at some point get on the inside. Like I said, Sandhagen has proven that he can be hittable at times, although he does have good movement. He can be hit, and yeah, with those hands of stone of Lineker, I do think he's going to connect with something, and I think he's going to put Cory Sandhagen away. So I'm going with Jon Lineker to win this fight via knockout. I think it's going to be in round number 2.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say about this fight? You know, there's a reason it's been rebooked. Everybody loves Jon Lineker due to his style. Like you've already mentioned, he comes forward, he's got an iron chin, he throws hard, he'll take a punch to give a punch every single time. And then you look over the other side of the octagon and you've got Cory Sandhagen there, who is a young upcoming prospect and a fighter that I think is going to go a very long way in his UFC career. Now, when the fight was originally booked, I had a plus 200 bet on Cory Sandhagen. You know, I did the tape at the time and I got a good read on the fight. Unfortunately, that line isn't there anymore. It's not even close. It's like more. It's a lot more closer to like plus 110 right now, which, in my opinion, is very respectful for Cory Sandhagen. I am picking him to win. You know, my analysis I felt was good last time out, and I still feel the same way this time as well. But I do think the line is very, very close. There's been a lot of respect paid to Cory Sandhagen, and I think there's reasons why, because, you know, when you look at his style, he's tall, he's 5'11", he's got an 8-inch height advantage over Jon Lineker. Now, 8 inches is a lot. It's a lot in height. Now, in not every scenario in the UFC, will a height advantage really play a part. You know, you can't say that for every fight, but I do think in this fight it will absolutely play a part. Now, Sandhagen's got a switch stance style. Obviously Lineker is an orthodox fighter, so Cory Sandhagen will be switching between orthodox and southpaw. I think it'll fare him a lot better in this fight if he stays southpaw, because he is a kicker, and the way to alleviate that pressure, that forward aggressive pressure from a fighter like Jon Lineker, is to kick. Like we've just mentioned in the Cowboy Oliveira fight, to stop pressure, kicking is a very good weapon to utilise, especially when your opponent isn't going to try and take you down, which Lineker won't try and do that. So Cory Sandhagen really needs to get to that open body. He really needs to start throwing those kicks in at Lineker, and early. Even if Lineker's blocking him, just throw them, because it'll put Lineker off constantly trying to move forward. Lineker will move forward through punches all day long. That won't bother him at all, but the kicks will really slow him down, especially if Sandhagen starts going to the legs as well. And that's the other thing, because he's a switch stance fighter, he could switch back to orthodox and really start peppering that lead leg of Lineker really hard as well. So that's another method of kick that Cory Sandhagen can use to, like I said, just stop that forward pressure. That has to be his first point of call in this fight. Regardless of anything else, Cory Sandhagen has to stop Lineker coming forward, because that's ultimately where Lineker's going to have success. If he can cut the angles of Sandhagen. I actually think Sandhagen's got pretty good exits. The second that he feels his back's going to touch the cage, he'll get himself out of there, he'll angle and move out. But Lineker is also really good at cutting the cage off. So if Lineker does start to get the upper hand in that respect to this fight, then we could see a situation where Lineker's, like we see it in every single fight, he's got his opponent with the back against the cage and he's just unloading strikes. Now, the other thing that you've got to consider is, because Sandhagen's so tall, Lineker, you would imagine, is going to try and dig to the body himself. So when he gets Sandhagen's back against the cage, or if he gets against the cage, I would imagine he has moments of that in this fight, he is going to be tearing to the body. That chin's 8 inches higher than him. You know, we all know that the harder punches come either straight or down. That you lose power punching upwards. So with that chin being so far up, 8 inches up, I find it hard to see, excuse me, I find it hard to see Sandhagen's chin getting checked that much in this fight, but the body shots is going to be something that Lineker is wanting to utilise. Now, normally, you would think, well, you know, Lineker's moving forward, he does mix body and head shots up really, really well, and what that makes their opponent do is start to miss time, whether it's coming to the body or going to the chin. That ultimately starts allowing Lineker to land to the body and the chin. But with Sandhagen, it's a little bit different because he tends to keep his hands pretty low. Like he hasn't got a high guard. He tends to trust his movement, trust his head movement, and his hands are pretty low anyway. So when Lineker's ripping to the body or trying to rip to the body, the chances are the guard is already going to be down there because, like I say, he hasn't got a high guard. His guard's quite low. I just think stylistically this fight does favour Cory Sandhagen. And the other thing to mention as well, which again not a lot of people talk about because it is quite hard to notice, but if you go back and watch Lineker's fights, a lot of the times in the third round, Lineker really slows down. But the fact is, you don't really notice it that much because it's not it's not a huge gas tank issue. It's not as if he's got his hands on his knees and he's huffing and puffing and he's struggling to continue. It's not like that. But it's the volume that slows down because he slows down. And the reason you don't see it so much is because his opponent's normally more tired than what he is from the damage he's just taken over the last 10 minutes. But he does slow down. The volume starts slowing down. The combinations turn into one punch or two punches. Then he starts to slow down even more to the point where he's waiting for his shots and he'll burst forward with a 1-2 rather than just keeping the volume constantly going in that third round. And I think if Cory Sandhagen's got a decent gas tank come that third round in this fight, Cory Sandhagen will definitely out-volume him in round 3. He'll start getting the upper hand. The movement will be starting to be more apparent for Cory Sandhagen. Sandhagen will be able to start moving forward. His movement will be looking better. His volume will be better, and he'll just start taking over that last round. And then ultimately, if he takes that third round, it comes down to one of the first 2 rounds, and you've got to be asking yourself, can Sandhagen take one of the first 2 rounds? And I absolutely think he can. Now, you're right in what you're saying, John. Lineker always looks good on the judges' scorecards because of his style, forward aggressive pressure, volume, power, the oohs and ahs from the crowd. But Sandhagen's also going to be landing some hard stuff. Sandhagen's also going to be landing volume. Sandhagen's also going to be getting oohs and ahs from the crowd. I think this is a really close fight, and it's a fight that I think Cory Sandhagen's going to win. The last thing that I will say about this is Lineker's coming back from a rib injury as well. Now, I don't know how bad that was. Well, it must be fully recovered because I wouldn't imagine Lineker would want to get back in the cage if it's not fully recovered. But we don't know the extent to that rib injury, and those kicks from Sandhagen are going to be coming to the body and the head hard. So if that rib is not 100%, then we could be looking at Lineker being more hurt in this fight than we've seen in any of his other fights. Like I say, that's just a minor spin-off point, but ultimately I just think stylistically this fight favours Cory Sandhagen. I think he's going to be able to put keep a pace over 3 rounds a little bit better than what John Lineker is going to be able to do. I think he's going to be able to land more shots. I think the height's going to play a part, and I think Cory Sandhagen is going to take a win on the scorecard. So I've got Cory Sandhagen to win, and I think he's going to win via decision. And we move on to the parlay piece. The first parlay piece of the card is Roosevelt Roberts versus the newcomer Thomas Gifford. Now, Roosevelt Roberts is a fighter that I'm massively high on. He came in on his UFC debut from Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, where he won via rear naked choke. He took a debut against Daryl Horcher at the Ultimate Fighter 28 finale. Now, ultimately, for a guy that's 6-0 and was 5-0 before he had any showing on any UFC platform, you know, I'm classing Dana White's Contender Series as that. He coming into a UFC debut against someone like Daryl Horcher, who's been in there with some good fighters, even the likes of Khabib Nurmagomedov, you know, coming in against that sort of fighter, a veteran, under the bright lights of the sport for the first time and looking as good as what he did was a huge achievement for him. And like I say, he took the win as well. He didn't only just take the win, he finished Horcher. Not only did he finish Horcher, he finished him in round 1. So the dude is a huge prospect. Before the Dana White Contender Series card, I'd seen bits of Roberts, I did like what I saw from him. He's got a good stand up. He's got good wrestling. He's got great submissions, which I'll speak about in a little bit more detail later on. And then when he came into the Darrell Horcher fight, again, I ran through the tape a second time, and man, I just love what I see from this guy. He's athletic, he's big for the division, and like I say, he's showing all the signs and all the tools really early on that he can go really far in his UFC career. And like I say, I cannot say enough good things about the dude. Now, his biggest weapon in mixed martial arts is tying up the neck, whether that be a guillotine, a rear naked choke, Bravo chokes. He'll try and he'll attempt them all, and he gets them without their opponent really seeing them coming as well, which is always a bonus because you always get caught by what you don't see coming, right? So whether his opponents drop in drop a level change for takedowns, whether they just tie up with him in the clinch, he always seems to find a way around the neck, and he's not got 100% strike rate with it, you know. They do sometimes, his opponents do get the neck out, but it's the fact that he's always threatening with it, which is a huge danger for anyone stepping inside the cage, because you've ultimately got to make sure your neck is absolutely nowhere near Roosevelt Roberts at any point of the fight. And in that Darrell Horcher fight, for those that haven't seen, go back and watch that finish. It was fucking unbelievable. He got the guillotine in, he grabbed a hold of his neck, and Roberts picked Darrell Horcher up with the guillotine off his feet, to the point where Horcher had to put his legs back out to the cage to try and get some sort of balance. He got the tap, he dropped him on the mat, and his submissions are ridiculous. Doing that to Darrell Horcher in round 1 of your UFC debut is nothing short of impressive. Now, Thomas Gifford. Guy is also an interesting fighter. He's also got way more experience, 14-7 and 2, the 2 being the no contests. So he's got a lot of experience. And the interesting thing is, Thomas Gifford is also 6'1", so like I've just mentioned about Roosevelt being big for the division, Thomas Gifford is also big for the division as well. Now, with Gifford, his ground game is where he thrives the most. So he is very scrambly on the mat. He can get into good positions if you take him down and you're in his guard. He'll throw up arm bars relentlessly, triangles relentlessly. He's just one of, just imagine a fighter on the bottom throwing up all kinds of submissions constantly. He's one of those types of fighters, and it's really fun to watch. But the problem is with this stand-up, and I think this is where Roosevelt Roberts has really improved his game, and it's a really key aspect of his game as well. Because against Darrell Horcher, Roberts wasn't trying to hunt for the neck, he wasn't trying to hunt for takedowns, he was calm, he was cool on the feet, he was popping his jabs out, his movement was great, his distance management was great, his awareness to danger was great as well, because Horcher does pack a punch in his bombs. So Roosevelt was really patient, really technical, and really effective, and it was so effective to the point where he was massively running away with that first round on the scorecards that Horcher decided to press the action, pin him up against the cage, and try and work him in the clinch. Obviously subsequently left his neck in there and got caught, as I've already mentioned. But this is key to Roosevelt Roberts' game, because he doesn't need to be the one that hunts for the neck, that hunts for the takedowns. And in fact, making your opponents hunt that on you is enough room for you to try and enough reason for you to try and get a hold of that neck when you're Roosevelt Roberts and you're a necktie expert, Thomas Gifford, this fight I think is going to play the same way. Gifford's advantage is on the mat, definitely. That's where he thrives in his game. Now, Roberts will just be staying on his feet. I think he'll be throwing kicks out there, he'll be throwing his jab out there. He'll just be similar to what he did with Horcher. He'll just be very technical on his feet, he'll be really smart, he'll be landing the more volume, and he'll be running away with the rounds. And I think eventually, when Gifford starts realising that he's falling behind on the judges' scorecards, he's going to make the same mistake as what Horcher made. He's going to be the one that's had enough losing on the feet. He's going to be one that try and clinches up with Roberts. He's going to be the one that tries to take Roberts down, and at that point he's going to give away his neck. At this level of where Roberts is fighting at now, I think a lot of fighters are going to underestimate how good and how quick that he can tie these submissions up with. And I think he's going to rack up a load of submission wins until he starts fighting, closer to like the top 20, the top 15. That's when the submissions will start to dry up, because these fighters will start to drill these sort of submissions up really correctly during the fight camps. But right now, I think Roberts is a massive problem for anyone he steps in the cage against. Thomas Gifford has got a really tough debut in this fight. I think Roosevelt Roberts is going to submit him, like I've said. I think he's going to be winning on the feet. And if Gifford does try and take him down, I think Roberts is going to tie that neck up and strangle him. If Gifford does decide not to shoot, then I think that Roberts can just piece him up over 3 rounds on the feet. So I've got Roosevelt Roberts to win. I've got him to win via submission. He is the first part of the parlay piece. He is expensive. You're looking at anywhere between -350 and -400. But as a parlay piece, I think it's a very good piece to have, as long as you've got a dance partner, which I believe I have, which we'll talk about in a second. But Jon, Roosevelt Roberts, Thomas Gifford, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I really like the look of Roosevelt Roberts. He looked great in his UFC debut against Darrell Horcher. Of course, as you mentioned, he came in off the rear naked choke win in Dana White's Contender Series as well over Garrett Gross back in 2018. And these two guys are very similar in their build in the lightweight division. They're both about 6'1", both tall, lean guys, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because obviously, usually when they against most guys in the division, they probably have the height and reach advantage when it's when the fight's standing, but they kind of cancel each other out in that respect in this fight. And as you said, I think Roosevelt Roberts is the better striker. He's striking up pretty crisp against Darrell Horcher. He threw nice low leg kicks as well. He was hammering them into the calf of Horcher, and like you said, that kind of forced Horcher into pressing the action up against the fence, and it was scary how quickly Roosevelt Roberts locked in that standing guillotine, because the ref was actually threatening to separate the two guys, because there was a bit of stalling, not much was happening, and then literally in the blink of an eye, he pushed that head down, wrapped up the neck, and then he switched to that palm to palm grip, and yeah, he's obviously, you can tell this is something that he specialises in. He's got a really mean, nasty guillotine. I mean, he's got some multiple guillotine chokes on his record in his professional debut, and also several guillotines and standing guillotine wins in his amateur career. So it's clearly something that he specialises in, and he's the kind of guy that can kind of seems to be able to find that submission from any position, really, and that's why he's so dangerous. But like you say, it was his striking against Darrell Horcher that set that up. Now, going up against Thomas Gifford, like you say, he's a UFC newcomer. He hasn't fought under the lights of the UFC before. He's coming into this fight off the back of a win in V3 fights back in October last year. When you look through the promotions that he's fought, I mean, there's none of the big regionals that we often talk about as the good feeder promotions. I'm not taking anything away from the promotions that he does fight for and the guys he's fought before, because you don't have to fight for these big promotions to be a dangerous guy. But it just worries me betting a guy on the UFC debut. It worries me that he's got losses on his record via choke, via guillotine choke, albeit they were some years ago. It worries me that he has got 7 losses on his record already. I mean, like you said, he's more dangerous on the ground. When you look at a lot of his wins as well, there's a lot of triangles. There are guillotine chokes for him as well. If you look at his 2 fights against Trey Ogden, he fought him twice in KC Fighting Alliance. both of those wins were via guillotine in the round one. Traralgon trains with Glory MMA as well, with James Krause. That comes from a good camp, but yeah, Gifford was able to lock the guillotines on in those fights. He's the most recent fight against Traralgon, the second time they fought back in July last year. He did actually set those that guillotine up with strikes. He knocked Ogden down momentarily and forced Ogden to shoot, and he locked in that guillotine. But yeah, like you say, in the stand-up department, I do think Roosevelt edges it. I think he's sharper. I think he's got a crisper jab. I think his movement's better. And I also think he's more dangerous because Gifford will want to get the fight to the mat. And in order to get the fight to the mat, he could well put himself in a dangerous position, leave his neck exposed, and I think it's something that Roberts will capitalise on again. And I'm with you on this one. I think Roosevelt Roberts will get another submission. I think it'll be another guillotine. I think off Gifford trying to shoot, whether it's because Roberts is lighting him up on the feet, or whether it's just because Gifford has gone for the level change and he's left his neck out there. Well, he doesn't even need to leave his neck out there, because Roberts can find your neck. You don't even have to leave it out there for him to grab a hold of. And yeah, I'm going with Roosevelt Roberts to win this fight. I also agree with your statement that he will get a lot of submissions over mid-level guys up until he comes up against the real top-level guys who can defend his guillotine attacks. And yeah, I'm going with Roosevelt Roberts to win this fight. I think he's going to win via submission. I think it's going to be round 2.
Now, the next parlay piece, and the one that I think is going to raise quite a few eyebrows, but listen, there's reasons behind it, man. We've got Angela Hill and Jodie Esquibel, so already, for those that are familiar with MMA Twitter, you're going to already be having a smile on your face, waiting for this breakdown. But listen, styles make fights, and Angela Hill, in my opinion, this is a great fight for her to go and get a win against Jodie Esquibel. A motto of mine is a fighter never has to be great. They only have to be better than their opponent. And this is absolutely the case in this fight. I was expecting a minus 300 line on Angela Hill. It actually opened at like minus 220, I think. Then it dropped down into the minus 100s, like minus 195, I think it was. At this point, I was like, what is happening? And then I looked a couple of hours later, it was up at minus 300, where I expected it to open. But I expected it to open at minus 300 and then steam up to like minus 400 in this spot. And I don't think, and again, no disrespect to Angela Hill, I don't think she's the best fighter. You know, for me, this is a tailor-made fight for her. I know she's coming on short notice and etc. You know, Jodie Esquibel was supposed to be fighting Jessica Penne. Penne pulled out again. So they've put Hill in there. And listen, Hill really struggles against fighters that are more aggressive than her. She struggles against fighters that are going to try and take her down, that are going to try and wrestle her, that are going to try and submit her, fighters that are going to try and out-volume her. But none of these are Jodie Esquibel. And I don't rate Jodie Esquibel very highly. Again, no disrespect. I'm just calling it as I see it. But Angela Hill is going to out-volume this girl. She is going to land harder shots on this girl. She's better in the clinch than this girl. She's not going to have to worry about wrestling against this girl. She can go out there, and she's got a Muay Thai background, Angela Hill, so that's a style, so she's going to be able to go into this fight and just completely flourish. She's not going to, in my opinion, have too much coming back from Jodie Esquibel. This is a much easier fight, in my opinion, than what Marina Moroz was. Now, they are different fighters. Marina Moroz is obviously taller, but that being taller comes with more problems as well, because it's harder to find the chin, and it's harder to close the distance. You've got to work to close the distance as well. She's not going to have anything like that against Jodie Esquibel. She's going to have a movement advantage as well, so she's going to be able to, in my opinion, just go in the cage and pretty much do whatever she needs to in order to get that win. And I don't really know what else to say about this fight in regards to breaking it down, because if Jodie Esquibel comes out here and beats Angela Hill, I'm going to be shocked. And I'll say that right now, because I don't see a path to victory for her. Normally you can say, oh, you've got the puncher's chance, but is Jodie Esquibel really going to one-bomb Angela Hill? If she does, then, fair play to her. I'll tip my cap, but I cannot see it all. I could see Angela Hill potentially finishing. It ain't going to be a submission. I don't see this fight hitting the mat. I do think Jodie Esquibel might try and take her down sort of mid to late fight if and when she's realising that she's down on the scorecards. I can see her potentially trying to level change and taking Hill down, but I don't really see her getting Hill down. I'd be very surprised if she did, and if she did get her down and Hill couldn't stand straight back up again, I'd be very surprised. I just feel that I'm going to be surprised a lot if Angela Hill doesn't win this fight by whatever method she can't win by. I just feel that wherever the fight goes, Hill's going to have an advantage. She's going to be the aggressor during the entire fight. She's going to land the more volume. She's just going to be all over Jodie Esquibel, and I'm making it sound like Angela Hill's some world beater, and I don't think she is. I just feel that this is, like I've already mentioned, a tailor-made fight for her. I think she's got a good chance of stopping Jodie Esquibel at some point in the fight if, she starts getting some of the kicks through, whether it be to the head or to the body or to the legs, really slowing her down, piling volume on and needing the referee to come in and save her. But ultimately, I just think it's going to be a total 30-27 domination. I don't think Angela's going to drop around. I think she's going to be relatively fresh by the end of the fight as well, even though she's going to be probably the one that's worked the hardest throughout the fight. And a lot of people are talking shit on the line with it being like -300, -350, and you know what, to a degree I understand it, because you are laying chalk on Angela Hill at that price. But like I've mentioned right at the start of this breakdown, styles make fights. And it doesn't matter if your fighter isn't great, they've just got to be better than the other person across the cage of them. And Angela Hill is absolutely better than Jodie Esquibel. So if you are wanting to lay a parlay on this fight card, I don't believe there's many great spots for a parlay, if I'm being absolutely honest. But if you are looking at one parlay, then I really wouldn't hate Roosevelt Roberts and Angela Hill. Roosevelt Roberts, like I've said, is between -350, -400. Angela Hill is between -300, -350 right now. I do believe the Angela Hill line may drop a little bit, but I think Roberts is going to rise, so that'll end up evening itself out. I think you can probably pick up like a -140, -150 line with them both together as a parlay. I think it's a parlay that does cash on the night, and that's my final parlay piece. John, Angela Hill, Jodie Esquibel, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm not going to add a great deal to what you've already said, because I think you've covered everything pretty much. I'm not, no disrespect to Jodie Esquibel, but I'm not not really sold on her. I don't think she's at a great level, and she's got a lot of work to put in if she does want to get to the upper levels in the division. And yeah, I just think Angela Hill, like you say, styles make fights, and this stylistically isn't. I don't think it's going to be anything for Angela Hill to be massively concerned about, because as you mentioned, that she struggles against fighters that put real pressure on her. And if we look back through her losses, going all the way back to her UFC debut, her losses have been to Tisha Torres, and we know what kind of fighter she's. A lot of pressure, a lot of forward movement. Rose Namajunas, Jessica Andrade, Nina Ansaroff. Straight away they're four top-level fighters in the division. And then most recently she's lost to Courtney Casey, which was a close split decision. And then obviously that Randa Marcos fight, which she lost via armbar. But again, we know what kind of fighter Randa Marcos is. She's all pressure, which is the kryptonite to Angela Hill. But in this fight, I don't think she'll come under that kind of pressure. I think she'll be able to utilise her kicks. She's got an array of kicks that she likes to use. I think she'll be able to use those pretty freely. She's the better striker. I can't see Esquibel coming out and trying to wrestle her and be able to utilise a really strong, grinding, heavy style that really gets Angela Hill in a sticky spot and puts her in trouble and on her back foot. And yeah, I just think Angela Hill, I think she'll be able to, if she does get taken down, I think she'll be able to get back to her feet, because Esquibel he's really known for a really heavy top pressure. And that's if the fight even gets to the ground, if she can get her to the mat. And ultimately, I think this fight is going to go to a decision. I think Angela Hill is going to comfortably win all 3 rounds. I think she's going to be able to just utilise those kicks, utilise the jab, and just outwork her on the feet. And yeah, I've got Angela Hill to win this fight via a very comfortable decision as well.
And now it's time for the dogfight. And we believe the best underdog on this card is in the main event of the evening. You know, we've not missed that one off for sure. We've got Jacaré Souza, Hermansson now. With this new format of the podcast, obviously, we have to talk now to see which fighters are going in each section. Whereas before, with the old format, it was a little bit of a surprise for us both. So I know that we've got different outcomes of this fight, but the one thing that we do agree with is that the line is wide, and we believe that there's value on Hermansson to be had in this fight. Now, for me, everybody knows that I'm a huge fan of Hermansson, so I just think that he's a really, really well-rounded fighter. He's got power, he's got speed, he's got volume, he's aggressive, he's got awkward movement, relentless drive, he's got cardio, he's mentally sharp inside the cage, he's improving from fight to fight as well. And I said when I was on Half the Battle with my friend Dan, and we was recapping the Gaethje and Barboza card, and we spoke about Hermansson and Branch, obviously, because it ended in under a minute. It was one of the most impressive performances we've ever seen from Hermansson. And I actually said to Dan at the time that I do believe with the grappling and BJJ improvements that Hermansson has made over the last couple of years, I do believe his jiu-jitsu, and I said this, has got to the point where even grapplers that he faces in the future are going to be very cautious of trying to grapple Hermansson. Now, at that point, I wasn't anticipating Hermansson's next fight to be Jacaré, because Jacaré is a 6th degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, legitimate competition as well in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is a complete and utter submission threat. So I don't think he's going to be worried about going to the mat with Hermansson. So that's the first thing I wanted to clear up here. But just to give a little bit of insight to how improved Hermansson is. So he goes in there against Thales Leites, who's a 3rd degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He breaks his rib in the fight. He gets taken down in the 3rd round when his rib's already broken. He's already survived a 10-8 round in the 2nd round, and Thales Leites is on top. Hermansson reverses the position, gets on top, tries to submit Thales Leites, and then finishes Thales Leites with ground and pound, all whilst he's got this broken rib. And Thales Leites, like I've already mentioned, is a 3rd degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Very impressive. Then he goes into his next fight against Gerald Meerschaert. Gerald Meerschaert, another black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, another guy that has spent a career in MMA of submitting people. Hermansson goes in there, he takes him down, he controls him on the mat. Meerschaert has a chance to get back up. Hermansson nullifies it, he gets him back down. He submits the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Okay? Next fight, Dave Branch, a Renzo Gracie Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, goes in there and submits him in under a minute. Like, how fucking much more improvement can you expect from someone like Hermansson? I don't know what they're feeding that dude in regards to knowledge in the gym, but man, he strikes me as the type of fighter that I like to call a sponge. And that's not me saying he's soft. It just means me saying that the dude just seems to soak up everything that is being taught right now, and his development is absolutely crazy. Now, the reason I've touched upon this grappling is because this fight is absolutely key to this grappling, and I think if Hermansson is to beat Jacaré, he has to engage in grappling. And at this point, everyone's probably listening to this thinking, what the fuck are you on about? That's how he loses to Jacaré. But listen, this is how I see this fight. If Hermansson comes into this fight and he's very tepid on the feet, and he's on the back foot, and he's very aware of not wanting to tie up with Jacaré in case Jacaré takes him down and submits him. That to me shows a lack of confidence in everything that Hermansson's developed him. And to me, that gives Jacaré a good chance to close the distance and really force that offence on Hermansson to put him on the mat. And I do think if Jacaré can work on top and have a couple of minutes on top, especially early on in the fight, I think he is going to get Hermansson out of there. But if Hermansson is still aggressive himself and just trusts himself and just believes in his scrambles, his foot sweeps, his ability to stand back up, his ability to get on top, his ability to land ground and pound, if he believes in just sticking by what he knows, which is being aggressive, landing volume, if the grappler ties up with him, just dealing with it. He's not the same fighter that he was when he fought Cesar Ferreira. He's not that same fighter. And I'm not saying he's anywhere close to Jacaré in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and on the mat, but Hermansson has to have confidence in this fight. If he gets tied up, so be it. Deal with it. Make Jacaré work, because this is a 5-round fight, and later down the line, there's only one guy that's cardio is going to last that 5 rounds, and that's Hermansson. I don't believe Jacaré Souza can last 5. I mean, we saw what he was like after like 7 minutes against Kelvin Gastelum. And listen, Jacaré was the one on top in that first round in that fight. He was the one that should have been gassing Gastelum, not gassing himself out by working on top, which is his bread and butter, which is down in his world, And Jacaré was the one that was tired. So Hermansson just has to be confident. Look, if Hermansson gets taken down, just stall, just defend the takedowns, just stay sharp. If you throw away that first round, fuck it, throw away the first round. If you throw away the second round, fuck it, throw away the second round, because I can guarantee Hermansson will take over this fight the longer it goes on. If he has to throw 2 rounds away by getting taken down, but making Jacaré work without submitting him, then that puts Hermansson in a great position to win this fight by either stoppage or via decision. I think Jacaré does have some success taking Hermansson down early over the first 7.5 minutes. I think Hermansson will need to be very sharp, and it's going to be very scary for him early on. But I think that he survives those scares. I think his development in jiu-jitsu is unbelievable. I think it's enough for him to stop himself from getting submitted, even though he will get rolled on whilst he's on the mat. I think it's enough to get him through those scary early stages. I think Hermansson's going to be the fresher fighter come late second round, third round. I think he's going to pour it on Jacaré. I think Jacaré's going to start searching for those desperation takedowns like what we saw against Robert Whittaker. And I think the Joker, Hermansson, is just going to turn it up, put it on him late, and I think he's going to finish him. So I've got Hermansson to win. I've got him to win by knockout. And for me, he is the underdog play of the card. John, who have you got?
As you said in the introduction to this fight, we have to obviously now discuss where we're going to go and what we're going to do with these picks, and obviously one of the things is discussing who is going to be the better picks for sections like the underdog. And I definitely think Hermansson with the line the way it is the ideal guy to put in the dog section, because as you've just said in your breakdown, he's improved massively. He's come on leaps and bounds since those losses to Cesar Ferreira and Thiago Santos, and he's looking very dangerous now with his offensive submission game. I know you mentioned Gerald Meerschaert. He got the guillotine in the first round, and David Branch, he was really impressive just last month when he defeated him via guillotine choking within a minute in the first round. And he's definitely come on leaps and bounds, and there are definitely paths to victory in this fight for Hermansson. But yeah, I'm going to go against Hermansson in this fight, and I am picking Jacaré Souza to win this fight. I mean, as you mentioned before, the Kelvin Gastelum fight, obviously Jacaré was tired. He was tired early, and that was with him being on top. He went on to lose a split decision in that fight, but look at his fights around that. His last fight at UFC 230 was against former champion in Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman is a much higher level than any of the guys Jack Hermansson has faced in his career so far. And Jacaré managed to put Weidman away in the third round with punches. So he does still have the gas in his tank in the third round to put away a former champion. I know Chris Weidman isn't the fighter that he was when he was champion, but he was still able to put Weidman away. And as you mentioned, he is a 6th degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and we can't forget that. And for me, it's going to be that Jiu-Jitsu that wins him this fight. I think he will have success against Hermansson in the early takedowns. I mean, Jacaré isn't all submissions as well. I mean, he is a decent striker. I mean, his striking is constantly getting better. We saw that against Derek Brunson. He got that win via set it with the head kick and then follow up strikes. And as I mentioned, that Chris Weidman fight most recently, he put Weidman away with strikes, and his striking is getting better all the time. And So we can utilise that to set up his takedowns more. Now it's not just a case of he's got no striking whatsoever and he goes in there and just constantly shoots takedowns, kind of like a Damian Maia kind of guy. No disrespect to Maia, I love Damian Maia. His striking is also getting better, but it's nowhere near at the same kind of level that I think Jacaré's striking is. But yeah, I do think that Jacaré will be able to take Hermansson down, and I do eventually think that with his super impressive resume with grappling and jiu-jitsu, I do think he'll be able to get a submission. I think he'll be able to finish Jack Hermansson. I think it's going to be in the second round. Let me just go into a bit more detail as to why I can't pick Jack Hermansson to win this fight. As I said, I wouldn't be surprised massively if, as you described it, as if Jacaré took Hermansson down in round 1, round 2, maybe round 3, and if he can stave off those submission attempts, then I do think Hermansson has the gas tank to be able to outwork Jacaré in round 4 and 5, and it's just a case of whether Jacaré will be able to survive those rounds, take it to the judges, and whether he will win on the scorecards. But the other reason as well is, obviously you mentioned Hermansson's recent wins, and his win over Dave Branch was really impressive. Joel Meerschaert, he's got some good wins on his record. He's got a number of guillotine chokes on his record, and he ended up getting finished via guillotine choke. But he made some terrible decisions in that fight. I mean, there were a lot of scrambles on the ground, and he disengaged and they got the fight back standing. Then he tried to pull the guillotine, and it all went horribly wrong from there. Thales Leites, as we mentioned, I mean, this is still a 2018 Thales Leites, and as you mentioned, Hermansson was in trouble. He did come back to win that fight, but he was in trouble in that fight against the 2018 Thales Leites, who was on the way out. His career was coming to an end. It was his penultimate fight. He decided his next fight against Hector Lombard would be his retirement fight. I mean, Thales Leites' record around that Hermansson fight, I mean, he lost the fight before that to Vares, he lost to Christoph Jotko, he lost to Massas, he lost to Bisping, and he's not the Thales Leites that fought years ago. And then before that was the Thiago Santos loss, and then you're looking back to guys like Brad Scott and Alex Nicholson. No offense to those guys, but for me, they're your regional guys. I don't think they're UFC caliber. Obviously, we've seen Brad Scott has since tested positive and received his ban. Alex Nicholson's now over at PFL, I believe, fighting over there. And yeah, for me, then they're not the kind of standard of guys that Jacaré has been fighting all his career, and it's for that reason that I can't pick Hermansson. As impressive as he's looked, I just don't think he's coming up against guys as dangerous as those that Jacaré are facing. I mean, we'll just go through his last 4 or 5 fights. Chris Weidman, Kelvin Gastelum, who just put on that epic fight with Adesanya, Derek Brunson, Robert Whittaker, who is the champion awaiting to fight Adesanya, Tim Boach, Vitor Belfort, Yoel Romero. I mean, they're all beasts, man. I know we're going back a few years to that Yoel Romero fight, but he's been fighting the best of the best for years. He's got a fantastic caliber in his jiu-jitsu background. His striking's good. I mean, the only way I can see Hermansson winning is if he really can stave off those submission attempts in the first 2 or 3 rounds and come back late on when Jacaré tires. But I just don't think he's going to be able to do that. And for that reason, I'm picking Jacaré Souza to win this fight via submission in round 2.
And with the breakdowns complete, we'll now enter the quick fire round. And first up is Glover Teixeira versus Ion Cutelaba, another fight that's been rebooked after it fell apart. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this fight could quite easily have been on one of the Showtime sections. It's going to be a fun fight. I'm in an ahhing back and forth as to who I think is going to win this fight, and my pick again is similar to my reasoning behind the Jacaré fight, just because of the level of guys they've been fighting and their experience and whatnot. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Glover Teixeira to win this fight. I think it's going to go into the later stages. And I can either see Teixeira winning via submission in round 3 or getting a decision win. For argument's sake on this podcast, I'm going to go with a decision. So yeah, I've got Glover Teixeira to win this fight via a decision.
Yeah, I'm picking Glover Teixeira as well. Same thing as you. I was really toying between Ion Cutelaba. I mean, the dude looks huge. He packs a punch. Glover Teixeira is closer to the end of his career than he is to the beginning of his career. So, yeah, I'm going with the veteran experience of Glover Teixeira. It's not a massively confident pick. You know, Ion Cutelaba could knock him out at any point. He has the power to knock anybody out, and like I say, the durability of Teixeira is in question right now in this stage of his career. But if Glover Teixeira comes out and fights smart, takes him down to the mat, I think he'll be able to do what Gadzhimurad Antigulov couldn't do, which is A, keep him down, and then B, submit him. So I've got Glover Teixeira to win. I agree with you, John, but I'm taking him to win via submission. And in the next fight, we've got Ben Saunders versus the newcomer Takashi Sato. John, who have you got?
We seem to be talking a lot about veterans and them coming up against newcomers, and Ben Saunders is another guy who falls into that category of a veteran. And I mean, just at this point, I haven't really seen a great deal on Sato. Obviously, we know he's coming in from Pancrase. He's only got a couple of losses on his record. He's got a lot of finishes early in the fight. We know that Ben Saunders he's chinny now, and he gets finished often. When he loses, he gets finished. He's only got 1 win in his last 5 fights, and that was against another guy, Jake Ellenberger, who's right at the end of his career. And I just can't pick a 36-year-old 2019 Ben Saunders, unfortunately. So for that reason, I'm going to follow suit with Sato's recent record of early finishes, and I'm going to pick him to win via knockout in round 1.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with this one again as well. It's really difficult to gauge where Sato is. Obviously, he's a debutant, and we haven't seen a great deal from him against much high-level competition. But like you said, it's so hard to pick somebody like Ben Saunders, who is at the tail end of the career, whose durability, again, like I've just mentioned with Glover Teixeira, is in question. And the thing is, what I've noticed with Sato, he's very accurate with his straight punches down the pipe. So I think that when Ben Saunders is coming in, I think Sato's going to drop him with one of the straight punches, and I think he's going to subsequently finish him. Just one quick point to mention, though. The one thing that does worry me about Sato is we have seen him being taken down. We have seen him giving his back on his mat retention, which is always a worry. Now, with some fighters, that's absolutely fine, because they sort of half give the back to make sure they can stand back up to the feet. But what I've seen of Sato is he does loiter in those positions a little bit too long, which for someone like Ben Saunders, who's long and is savvy on the mat with his jiu-jitsu, he'll drop them hooks in, and ultimately Sato can be put in a bad spot. So that is my concern for Sato, along with the fact that he's a debutant under the bright lights for the first time. That's all stuff you've got to take into consideration. But that being said, I do think Sato finishes Ben Saunders. I'm taking Takashi Sato to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And in the next fight, we've got Andrei Arlovski versus Augusto Sakai. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I was quite surprised when I looked at the line for this fight and I saw Arlovski was the underdog in this fight. I know he's coming into the fight off the back of a 3-fight losing streak, and he's only won 2 of his about his last 9 or 10 fights. But I mean, Sakai's still a bit of an unknown quantity. Obviously, we've seen him fight before under the Bellator banner. He's not really got any notable wins over at Bellator. He lost to Czech Congo back in 2017 under Bellator. Since then, he went on a couple of he got a couple of wins over Cardoso, and then he fought in Dana White's Contender Series, getting the win in the second round. And then we saw his UFC debut. It was against Chase Sherman. We've mentioned Chase Sherman several times on this podcast, especially for guys who have fought against him and when they've got that win against Chase Sherman on their record. I mean, there was a reason why he's released from the UFC, and they've got a very thin heavyweight roster. No offense to Chase Sherman, because I do like his fighting style and stuff, but there is a reason why he got released when they're thin on the ground in the heavyweight department anyway. So I don't know how much you can how much you can read into that. And when you look at Arlovski's fights, Walt Harris, he can be dangerous. Abdurakhimov, who obviously we saw last weekend, looked really good. Taito Ivasa, he's an up and comer. And then you're going back to guys like Ngannou, Josh Barnett, Overeem, Stipe Miocic. His 2 wins he picked up were against Junior Albini and Stefan Struve, both decisions. His fights do tend to go to a decision nowadays. He tends to be a lot more cautious. He's not quite as chinny as everyone kind of makes out. I know he can be knocked out, he can be cracked, but I mean, his last 6 fights have all gone to a decision. Tuivasa's a hard hitter and hit him with some heavy shots, but couldn't put him away. It just depends what output we see from Arlovski in this fight, because sometimes we see him quite active and sometimes we see him lose close split decisions, like the Walt Harris fight and the Abdurakhimov fight. I know that was a unanimous decision, but it was just his lack of output really that lost him that fight. So it's going to be a close fight. I think it will go to a decision. I am going to pick Andrei Arlovski to win this fight just because of his experience. Like I mentioned with Sakai, we don't really know where he is at the moment in comparison to UFC caliber. And yeah, I just think Arlovski will play it safe, be able to work behind the jab. I think he'll be just active enough to get the nod in the judges' eyes. So I'm going with Andrei Arlovski to win this fight via decision.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you once again. I'm not massively sold on Sakai as we're speaking right now. The dude is still young, so improvement is definitely going to be there. We're definitely going to see it over the coming years. But like I said, as I'm sitting here right now breaking this fight down with you, I'm looking at a fighter that is quite slow on the feet. In regards to his strikes, he doesn't move actually too badly for a big dude, but he's quite slow on the feet. He wings 1-bombs. He doesn't really pack too much volume. He doesn't really throw too many kicks. So it's almost like this fight is predominantly going to be a boxing fight because Arlovski is predominantly a boxer as well. So all this sort of stuff from Sakai, all the stuff that we've seen from him, takes place on the feet, unless Arlovski thinks he can mix it up and take him down, which I think will be a big ask. Like I say, Sakai's a big dude. He'll expend a lot of energy trying to take him down. But I think Arlovski's volume and his precise boxing is going to be what gets him through this fight. I know we've kept saying for a while now that Arlovski's at the tail end of his career and how much has he got left, but yeah, he keeps on putting some decent performances on. The Walt Harris fight, I thought he actually won that fight as well. So Yeah, I like Arlovski to win this fight, unless Sakai's made some massive improvements in speed and volume, specifically in his punches. I think Arlovski will cruise to a decision, so I've got Arlovski to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. Now, in the next fight, we've got Carla Esparza against the newcomer Virna Jandiroba. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'd never seen much of Jandiroba until I started watching some tape ahead of this fight. She's going up against a bit of a veteran in the UFC now, the Cookie Monster, Carla Esparza. From what I can see from Jandiroba, she's most dangerous on the ground. She does the best work on the ground. I mean, a lot of her wins have come via submission, on triangles, arm bars, rear naked chokes, and Carla Esparza really is her bread and butter as well is her wrestling and her ground game. So it could be interesting. The two could well cancel each other out, and saying that, I think if it does end up a standing battle, I think Esparza's striking is slowly getting better and better every fight we see her. It's still not top level by any stretch of the imagination, but like I say, it is getting better. And if the two do cancel each other out, stand on the ground, and it stays standing, I do think Esparza just edges it in the striking department. So for that reason, I'm going with Carla Esparza to win this fight via decision.
Yeah, I'm going the opposite way in this one. I'm going to take the newcomer Jandiroba, and I'll tell you why. I think that if the fight stays on the feet, you're right in what you're saying. Carla Esparza's striking has slowly been improving, and that's testament to her, because for fights like this one, where I think it will hit the mat, if she can keep it standing, then she will have an advantage. But like I've just mentioned, I think the fight will hit the mat. I think it'll be won and lost on the mat as well. So where Carla Esparza, in my opinion, is probably the better wrestler, Jandiroba is by far the better grappler. Her grappling is legit, man. Like, her scrambles are good. Her ability to get on top when she's looking like she's about to end up in a bad position on the mat is incredible. She looked fantastic on the mat against an also legit grappler in Mizuki in a way, in Invicta. And I just think that she's got good level changes, good entries, quick takedowns, out in the open mat as well, which you don't normally see too often in women's MMA. But then if she does push Esparza towards the cage, I think she can drag Esparza down, even if it means pulling herself into an initial bad position. I think she'll be able to flip her way around to make sure she's on top. Like I say, I just think the fight is going to be won and lost on the mat. I think Jandiroba is the better grappler, and I think she's going to remain unbeaten, and I think she's going to take the win. So I've got Virna Jandiroba to win. I'm going to take her to win via decision. And in the next fight of the night, we've got Jim Miller versus the returning Jason Gonzalez. John, who have you got?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see Jason Gonzalez back in there. Obviously, he hasn't fought since 2017. His last fight was obviously a loss to Gregor Gillespie, but we now know how much of a beast and a relentless wrestler and takedown artist Gregor Gillespie is. His only other loss in the UFC came in his debut against Drew Dober. Again, Drew Dober's a dangerous guy, tough competition. He's got one win on his record against JC Cottrell via Darce choke, and he's going up against the veteran Jim Miller, a Jim Miller who he's coming into this fight with just one win in his last 6 fights, and I always find it hard to pick Jim Miller, but I also find it hard to pick against Jim Miller just because of how dangerous his submission game is, and how he does have that ability to get the fight to the mat and get a submission like out of nowhere. But I have got to pick Jim Miller in this fight, although he does only have one win since 2016, and I think he'll be able to. I do think he'll be able to get Jason Gonzalez down, and I do think he'll be able to lock in a submission and get the victory. And when you look through those losses, Charles Oliveira, Dan Hooker, Trinaldo, Anthony Pettis, Dustin Poirier, they're top level guys, and Jason Gonzalez is not on that level yet. Although Jim Miller isn't the kind of relentless wrestler that Gillespie is, I do think he'll be able to get him down at some point in the fight, and I do think he'll be able to work and get a submission. So I'm going with Jim Miller to win this fight via submission.
Yeah, I'm going the opposite way again. I'm going to pick the underdog, Jason Gonzalez, and I was actually pleasantly surprised with what I'd seen from him in tape. You know, I didn't think pre-tape that he was that dangerous, but actually looking back at his fights, the dude is very dangerous. He's also tall, rangy. He's accurate with power as well. He's probably the fighter that's looked best against Gregor Gillespie than any other, which is an absolute testament to him as well. As we now know, Gillespie's a beast. We did have an inkling at the time he was, but we definitely know that now. The way to beat Jason Gonzalez is quite simple. You've either got to be a more aggressive striker than him, which Jim Miller I don't believe is, or you've just got to absolutely wrestle fuck him and keep him on the mat. And I don't believe, with what I've seen from the Gonzalez and Gillespie fight, that Jim Miller has the ability to take him down and keep him down whenever he wants. Gonzalez looked like he had decent takedown defense. Obviously, he succumbed to it, as everybody does with Gillespie. And he also had a decent mat retention as well, again, until he succumbed to the choke. So Miller isn't anywhere near Gillespie's quality when it comes to MMA wrestling. So I think Gonzalez is going to end up tiring Miller out with pressure and with making Miller really work inside the cage, whether it be on the feet or with takedowns, closing distance. And I think Jason Gonzalez is going to put him away late. So I've got Jason Gonzalez to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. Now in the next fight, we've got Court McGee versus Diego Lima. Interesting fight. John, who have you got?
Yeah, interesting fight, and again another one that I found tough to pick. If we were talking about this fight pre Diego Lima against Chad Laprise, I'd be quite confidently picking Court McGee to win this fight, because there's two losses for Lima prior to that. Laprise fight was against Jesse Taylor, Yushin Akami. His kryptonite seems to be those kind of guys that will wear on him and pressure him, wrestle him, and that's kind of McGee's style. I think Court McGee will try to do that. Will try to wrestle him, will try to tie him up, not allow him to get off any of his strikes. But of course, Lima did look impressive against Laprise, and I'd picked Chad Laprise to win that fight, and I was surprised at the outcome. I was surprised with how impressed I was with Diego Lima. That being said, although it's very close, I am going to edge to Court McGee. I mean, when you look at his recent losses, they've come to Sean Strickland, Ben Saunders, Ponzinibbio, Ryan LaFleur, but a lot of those fights were besides the Ponzinibbio fight, who we know has got extreme power in those hands. His losses have come by decision, and he doesn't. Although he's a veteran and he's been through some wars, he doesn't tend to get finished very often, which I don't think plays well into Diego Lima's hands, because I think if this fight does go the duration of the 3 rounds, I think McGee will be able to grind him and take him down enough, and keep him on the mat for long enough to get the nod in the judge's eyes. So I'm going with Court McGee to win this fight by decision.
Yeah, I agree as well, but I also agree that it's a really tough fight to call, because from Court McGee's side, he's a gritty, grindy wrestler type of fighter. He's coming off a decent win against Alex Garcia, and that's the exact type of fight that Diego Lima has struggled with in his previous fights. So stylistically, instantly gives an advantage to Court McGee. But then, on the other hand, Court McGee is not looking any better each time he steps inside the cage. He looks like he's aging a shit ton, man, and it does look like he is heading towards a decline or towards the end of his career. Whereas Diego Lima, from the other hand, coming off some bad losses, goes out there and knocks Chad Laprise out in round 1, where pretty much every man and his dog was either picking or betting Chad Laprise. So fair play to Diego Lima for that. So Lima's coming into this fight off that first round knockout, full of confidence, full of energy, against an older, potentially declining fighter in Court McGee that's got a style that like I've already mentioned, that Liam has struggled against, which ultimately makes the fight so hard to call. I think Court McGee is going to win, though. I'll always favour that gritty grinding style against someone that's had previous problems with it in the past. So I'm going to take Court McGee to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the last fight, I made it the last fight because I'm not sure where it's going to place on the card. We've got Gilbert Burns versus the newcomer Mike Davis. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is another fun fight. I'm a really big fan of Gilbert Burns. He's a dangerous submission guy. If he gets the fight to the mat, the newcomer could be in real trouble. From what I've seen of Mike Davis, obviously he's a very short notice opponent, but he looks good in the stand-up department. I'm not sure whether Gilbert Burns will want to stand with him. He's got a lot of finishes on his record via strikes. He can go late into the third round and still get those wins. But I'm going to go with the UFC veteran in Gilbert Burns. I think he will be able to get the fight to the mat, and I do think he'll be able to lock on a submission. His striking is getting better. We saw that against Jason Sago and Dan Moret. But yeah, his bread and butter is still that grappling background. I don't think he'll want to stand with Mike Davis for too long. So I think he will take the fight to the mat, and I do think he'll be able to lock on a submission. So I've got Gilbert Burns to win this fight via submission.
Yeah, and again, I'm a huge fan of both guys. You know, obviously, who doesn't like watching Gilbert Burns fight? Chucks bombs, got an amazing grappling game as well. But Mike Davis, on the other hand, again, this dude is no slouch, and he's someone that I've said for a few months now that we need to get him in the UFC, and it will only be a matter of time before he gets called up. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks ago, it was announced that he's getting his call up. So really happy for the guy. Really deserves this spot. But he is stepping up a weight division for this fight, and I think it is because it's short notice, obviously. Yeah. Probably not enough time to get the weight down. So he stepped up to give Gilbert Burns a fight. But, man, the UFC have not thrown Mike Davis in this fight to give Gilbert Burns a win. I'll tell you that for free. Put your money away. So, listen, with Gilbert Burns, he fell in love with his striking. And if this fight was before the Aubin Mercier fight, I would be absolutely picking Mike Davis to win this fight. Because at that point, Gilbert Burns looked like he just liked to stand and bang. He fell in love with knocking people out, and I think if he tries that against Mike Davis, he's going to end up flat on the canvas himself. But after seeing the Aubin Mercier fight, it does seem to me that was a good opportunity for Gilbert Burns to knock Aubin Mercier out, and he even dropped him as well in that fight. But he didn't. It's like someone had already told him this beforehand, before the fight, and you could tell his IQ had been fixed, man, from wanting to just stand and wing bombs. And against Aubin Mercier, he was looking for the takedowns as well, because he knew that was his path to victory. Listen, he just dropped Aubin Mercier, and Aubin Mercier isn't a slouch on the ground, yet Gilbert Burns knew that the ground is where he needed to be in order to definitively win the fight. I think he's going to do the same thing here. I think he is going to take Mike Davis down at some point in this fight. I think he's going to submit him. So I'm taking Gilbert Burns to win. I'm going to take him to win via submission. And that's it for this week's podcast, guys. So, John, before we hit the Newsome MMA mentions, what do you need to mention, man?
Just sound like a broken record again, but as always, check out my stuff, check out my work, Newsome MMA. As you mentioned before we broke down the fights, subscribe to the YouTube channel, man, because we get some good stuff out there. We've got some real good interviews coming up over the next few weeks as well, starting with Bellator middleweight standout Fabian Edwards. That'll be coming this week, so keep an eye out for that. And as always, just hit me up on Twitter at MMAme. Make sure I'll follow you back, and I like to talk all things MMA with you guys out there. So yeah, hit me up on Twitter at MMAme.
Awesome. Now for the Newsome MMA mentions. First of all, I just want to mention the Newsome MMA website. Don't forget to visit the website at newsomemma.co.uk, where you will find my MMA betting section, which will provide written betting advice for 3 of the fights that are in the quickfire round today. You'll also find the locally famous tape index feature, prediction videos from other good MMA content creators on Twitter and YouTube, fighter interviews, content collaboration from Heavy Duty Fight Management, and you can even request colour commentary and media coverage from Newsome Newsome MMA as well. The next mention is the long-term sponsor of Newsome MMA, CBD Life UK. CBD is an amazing product and something that I use myself. Thousands of professional athletes also use CBD too, and at CBD Life UK they've got a wide variety of products to suit the needs of any customer. You can go to cbdlifeuk.com and use promo code Newsome MMA to also get 15% off your order. And the final mention is the newest sponsor of Newsome MMA, Golden Ticket Fight Promotions. Golden Ticket put on some fantastic MMA shows and are one of the biggest regional promotions in the Midlands over here in the UK. The next event is at the Hangar Events venue in Wolverhampton on May the 18th. Tickets are on sale right now. You can follow them on all the social channels, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, to keep up with everything Golden Ticket. Jon, you've announced as well you're going to be calling some of the fights on that card as well, so that's awesome. And that's it from us, guys. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night and we'll see you next week.